Morning, folks, people, persons. Dude, I gotta get in a groove, you know? Like I gotta get warmed up. It's funny how many false starts I'll do and then suddenly I kick off and I'm off and running. It's weird to just turn on a electrical device and talk to it knowing that thousands of people are gonna see you sitting here talking. It's really weird. I'm just like, well, screw it, whatever, you just do it and it seems to work out okay. If you think about it too much, you can really trip out over that. I just don't, really. Good morning, minions of the internet. Wow, crazy Russian hacker has 3 million plus views on his "You've been splitting fired with an axe wrong" video. I need views like that. That's like 3,000 bucks. You know what I could do with 3,000 bucks? I could get a new laptop. Anyway, this is my computer and I'm gonna look up questions here from Patreon. I asked my Patreon supporters to ask me questions and I figured that was a good perk. Plus those people are heavily invested in my content already, so most of them have probably watched, you know, a lot of my content or most of it. So they're more likely to know what I've already covered and haven't covered and ask questions that maybe I haven't answered yet. It just limits the pool of questions that I get. You know, I try to answer questions at least briefly on comments, and I'll keep doing that as long as I can afford to do it, you know, time-wise, because it does take time. But I thought this was a good idea. We're just going to try it out. It either works or it doesn't. If it does, it might become a regular thing. I don't know if it'll be scheduled or what, but this is the first one, and let's see how it goes. I don't know how long these are going to run on. Like, it's really hard for me to give the dummy version of things because that's just not what I'm about. That's some kind of disclaimer, I guess. I don't know. All right, Patrick Mann asks, I have a few things on my mind. Do you have voles? That's voles are also called meadow mice, so these short, fat little rodents with short tails, and they eat tree bark a lot and other plants and roots and stuff. If so, how do you protect your trees? I remember you put wire mesh in your saffron bed. You do something similar for trees. And what's your process when planting out trees into their final location? I've heard everything from just planting into a slit in the ground to scooping out and amending large pits. All those are related. I mean, there's kind of a little complex of things I could address there relating to planting, establishing, and protecting fruit trees. And yeah, this is important because I'm always pushing the idea of planting fruit trees, and yeah, what do you do to make sure that they make it? And the whole question of, yeah, what kind of hole do you plant in is really relevant and interesting too. So there's an article that I will of course link in the description. I shouldn't have to say that anymore, and I've not been saying it as much, but it should be always assumed that if I mention something, I should be linking it in the description of the video, and if I don't, you should remind me and ask me to do it. Anyway, this article is on how to establish trees in our climate here, or how I establish trees in our climate here, and it's kind of like an evolving process, and I've changed some things I don't do as much, but mostly that's pretty good advice, I think, as far as I remember. And it's one of the earliest blog posts I wrote. It's probably like 7 years old or something now. Let's start with the hole. So the hole, to me, you should either go small or go big. It doesn't make too much sense to me to go in between. So what I mean by that is most of my trees are planted just in like maybe an 18-inch hole or something like that. 18 inches in diameter, 18 inches deep, something like that, because that's about the size of the wire baskets that I make, which we'll get to in a minute. So my logic with that is that, you know, the native soil is what the tree's going to grow in. So why not just put it where it's going to be and make it go out and seek out nutrients and seek out water and quickly have to become self-sufficient and not pampered and go out and seek the resources that it needs. The other school of thought would be to dig a larger hole, let's say 3 foot by 2 foot or something like that, and amend that and put nutrients in it and stuff and make a happy place for the tree. Well, one possible problem with that is that you're making a small happy zone for the tree, and it may not go out seeking other resources, which it has to do in order to be like a self-sufficient tree, because the root system of a tree is obviously going to get much larger than 3 by 2 feet. So why not just plant it in native soil in the first place and then feed it from the top? Now, I think it's different to plant a really big hole, and I've been experimenting with that. I'm on my second very large pit. These pits are 8 feet in diameter and 2 to 3 feet deep. That is different. That actually provides a substantial habitat for the tree roots. I mean, obviously they're going to grow out of that too, but it's enough for the tree to grow in just that for, you know, years before it finally gets out of that zone and starts going out of it. And those pits I'm calling catch pits. They're just a big hole in the ground, and I throw in whatever resources I have on the farm, like old hides, dead things out of the freezer, gut piles. I just threw in, one of my chickens got killed by a raccoon, so I put her in there. And then I layer that with charcoal and putting the dirt back with charcoal, so it's all mixed with charcoal. And that's just an experiment I'm doing, but I think it's going to work very well, is my guess. Preliminary results look really good. That's different though. I don't really think it's worth your while to dig a 2-foot hole and amend it really well. I think it's better just to dig a small hole, just big enough for the roots really, backfill that, plant the tree, and then make it go out and feed it from the top. Now the wire cages, I have voles and gophers. So the gophers they're really bad, but I don't have that many of them. So sometimes I plant trees without cages, like definitely with my apple seedling trials, which I have like, you know, 250 in the ground or something now. I don't use anything for those because that would be just prohibitively a problem. But it is good insurance if you only have a few trees, or you're not planting like huge quantities of trees especially. You can make a wire cage. So I like to use chicken wire, the cheap stuff that rots down. So even in like 2 years, like new chicken wire can rot in the soil here, and that way it doesn't strangle the roots. And it's really just to protect the tree while it's getting established. But I plant so many trees here that at some point I kind of just stopped using those for the most part. If you have a really heavy gopher population and big problems with gophers, I think it's a good idea though. And it's if you just have a few trees and you have gophers, it's cheap insurance. For voles, yes, I do have voles. This is a particularly bad year. There's some trees right out here behind me that got killed this year by voles because I let the vegetation grow up close to the trunks. But they're trees I don't want anyway. But it's just a matter of time until they get some trees that I do want. And in a bad year when there's a heavy population and I have vegetation growing up against the trunks, they'll get in there and eat the bark. And once they circle the bark completely, usually the tree's a goner unless you do something to fix it, like bridge grafting. You can graft in little sticks from the roots to the up to the bark to bridge the gap that the voles left, and that can work. Apparently, I've never done it, but you know, people do it. So for voles, what I like is these aluminum tree collars, and they're just a big sheet of aluminum from a printing press. So the old school printing presses use these big thin aluminum pieces of sheet metal, and that's actually the inks, the surface that's inked. It's like the print block basically. So once they're done with those, they recycle them. So you can buy those in stacks for basically scrap price. They make great plant tags. They make great tree tags. You can write on them with pencil and it stays. And they make really good vole collars. So what I'll do is I make a cylinder, like a tube that's open at both ends, put that over the tree, and then I work it down into the soil about 3 or 4 inches, you know, a good ways. So nothing can easily burrow, and they can't climb it because it's too slick. And that works really well for voles. If you don't work it into the soil, they'll get under there, and then that's even better for them. They love it. They love it in there. It's like protected, and there's a, you know, free food. Try that, and like any homestead, seriously, any homestead could use a big stack of those aluminum plates. They're really, really handy. I use them for garden tags all the time. You can cut them with scissors, or you can cut them with like the old school chopper paper cutter like this, like these things here. And they probably won't be available much longer because everyone's going to digital printing. They might be hard to find already. I don't know. I haven't gotten any for a few years. That reminds me I should go get a big stack before they disappear, because I want like a lifetime supply of those things. Call printing press places in your town, just, you know, small printers, and ask them if they still use those kind of plates, and will they sell you some for scrap price. And they're usually really cheap, you know, because aluminum isn't really worth that much. So that's my recommendation. Wire doesn't work very well because they can climb the wire. It's also messy and tangly. Like, these things are pretty stiff. You can break through them with a weed whip if you're not careful, and they can be damaged, but in general they just work really well and they last a long time. I think that's enough on that subject. I already went on longer than I wanted to. Read that article because it has all that stuff and how I make the wire cages and all that sort of thing. All right, Leroy Rock. What particle size of charcoal should I shoot for when incorporating biochar into the soil? Well, I don't know. I use corn kernel size and down is kind of my general thing, or maybe 1/4 inch and down. But I'm still experimenting, and I'm sure there's some science on that that's worth looking at as far as what's the most effective. If there's not, there should be soon, and that's probably worth availing yourself of, although that type of scientific information tends to reduce things to a state that maybe isn't totally relevant to our real lives. But intuitively, it seems like a lot of it should be powdered just to expose more of the surface area to interactions with the soil and plants. I don't know, that's just how it seems to me. On the other hand, I have been experimenting with large quantities of charcoal in the top of the soil, and it acts almost as a mulch. So just having a large quantity in there helps, but then the bigger particles sort of work their way to the top, and they end up kind of floating across the top and covering like half of the bed surface with these chunks of charcoal. So in that case, I wouldn't mind having them larger. Plus, the quantities are so high, the quantities of actual charcoal are so high that I'm not sure it's necessary to have it all crushed up, right? It's almost serving like two purposes. It's serving a physical purpose, is just kind of like a cover, like a bed cover, and to like break up the soil and make the soil more friable, but also it's doing its charcoal thing, like its chemistry charcoal thing of being able to adsorb nutrients and exchange them with plants and harbor microbes and all of that. It may depend on what your goals are and how much you're using too. What I'm doing is I want most of it to be reduced to something like powder, but with a grade of sizes going up, and you know, some of those can be like the size of a pea or whatever. It's probably going to mean sifting through like a 3/8 inch screen, a 1/4 inch screen maybe, or maybe even a 1/2 inch screen. But I can't answer that in any definitive way. Okay, here's a good one. You've recommended a boy's axe for beginners, but I feel like I read in either Bushcraft or the Axe book that full-size axes are safer for beginners because the long handle creates a large swing arc that keeps the axe head safely away from the legs and feet. Could you comment on this? That's from Tyler Miller. I don't really know what to recommend. Like for me, to really make a strong recommendation, I would have to have more experience teaching people in dealing with newcomers to axes. There's no doubt that a shorter handle is more likely to guide that head, you know, into your foot or your ankle, or in the case of very short axes, into your head or your knee or your thigh or something like that. They're dangerous, and in that sense, it's definitely true that short axes can be more dangerous. But with that said, they're also more accurate. That's worth a lot. You know, if you can hit what you're trying to hit and sink the axe into it, then that's good. The kind of work that I do, a short handle is very, very handy for getting in and limbing and stuff like that. And if you're dropping trees about like, say 12, even a little bigger and down, then a short axe just isn't, it's not that hard to drop those with a short axe. And also it's just what you're used to. So if you start with a long handle, you may just get used to it and never want to use anything else, and you'll easily adapt to it and you can do whatever work you need to do with it. For me, I'm used to short handles, and they have certain advantages like accuracy and maneuverability. Like I can like maneuver and work with my axe really easily. I can use it with one hand really easily, and I do all the time. And there are advantages to using a short axe. I don't really know. It's just a debate, and I think it's kind of what you get used to. But as far as what's best for beginners, there's no doubt short axes are dangerous that way, and it makes the learning process probably more dangerous, maybe. I don't really know. So yeah, I can't really answer that question. I could just talk about some of the factors involved. And I'm not sure what those other guys would recommend. Morris Kahansky tends to talk about and recommend axes about the size I use, with a 27-28 inch handle, which is something that you can grab by the head and hold out here. Let me just grab my axe real quick. He's talking about this measurement here. It's like you tuck this into your pit, you grab onto the axe head, and this is like the kind of ideal multi-purpose use axe length. The other one is that you stand and put it in your crotch, and it comes to like just up, tucked comfortably under your crotch, which this one's a little short on that, so, but roughly like that. And this one is 27 inches. It's technically a 28 inch handle, the Council Boys axe. There's going to be some some gray area in there. I don't think it's a question that you can just answer with a yes or no, this is the best thing or whatever. I like this axe. It's a great beginner axe for a lot of reasons. The safety reason, maybe not so much, but it's a light axe, so it's easy to handle, and that makes you less clumsy with it. It's got a short handle, so that makes you more accurate and less clumsy, and those count for something in safety. So I don't know. I can't really answer that question. That's the best I can do. Okay, that's enough for today. We'll see how this turned out, and there's lots more questions here. If you're on Patreon, feel free to throw in your question under the posts. It says ask me stuff. So yeah.